Hello, this is Bridget Rao with Divine Essentials. This is 7-Eleven, and that is serious, getting jealous. And this is the Complex PTSD book. They're happy that Mama's home. I was at work a little late today. They sent me on just a whole shit show. So, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 1, Understanding Trauma. And it says, if you were neglected or abused as a child, your primary orientation to the world is likely to be one of threat, fear, and survival. It's only natural that a childhood experience with untrustworthy parents or caregivers would leave you untrusting or confused about what constitutes a loving relationship. Fear and lack of safety might compel you to continuously scan your environment for potential threats. You may have relied upon coping strategies to survive, such as disassociation, a protective mechanism that disconnects you from threatening experiences. If you can relate to these qualities, you may also identify with related issues such as self-criticism, emotional suffering, and relationship difficulties. If this describes you, it is not your fault and you have not failed. You have a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Traumatic experiences are, by their very definition, frightening and overwhelming. PTSD is often associated with events such as car accidents, natural disasters, or acts of violence. It is common after experiences like these to feel flooded with powerful emotions such as fear or sadness, and to begin avoiding situations that remind you of the trauma. PTSD refers to the presence of these symptoms well after the event is over. However, there is another kind of post-traumatic stress called complex PTSD, which occurs as a result of long-term exposure to traumatic stress rather than in response to a single incident. CPTSD typically arises as a result of ongoing stress or repeated traumatic events that occur during childhood and is sometimes referred to as developmental trauma disorder. Growing up afraid has ramifications on cognitive, emotional, and physical development that can persist into adulthood until you have the necessary support to heal your wounds. CPTSD is not a character weakness. It is a learned stress disorder. The good news is this: you can reclaim your life from the costs of childhood trauma. When you are empowered with knowledge and awareness, you can deepen your self-acceptance and reduce the difficult emotions that often accompany developmental trauma. In this chapter and throughout this book, you will develop a greater understanding of complex PTSD and discover ways to mitigate its effects to help you heal. The goals of this workbook are to encourage a compassionate understanding of your symptoms and to provide you with action steps that will help you recover from developmental trauma. Learning self-care. By the time I met Diane, her suffering had become unbearable. She reported experiencing debilitating anxiety mixed with feelings of hopelessness and despair. She was married, but her relationship was suffering under the weight of her symptoms. In the past year, she had gained weight, developed migraines, and struggled with insomnia. Diane was very skilled at avoiding dealing with her traumatic past. To survive, she learned to bury her painful feelings and memories, preferring not to talk about her childhood. It simply hurt too much. She kept a tight lid on her past, but now her migraines and insomnia made her feel as though she were coming apart at the seams. Diane had lost a sense of choice or control over her emotional life. I learned that Diane had a history of exposure to domestic violence during her childhood. Her father was an alcoholic, and her mother was never really involved in her life, other than to tell her what she was doing wrong. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she said, "They never should have had children. I should have never been born." If you can relate to Diane's story in any way, take comfort in this. CPTSD is the result of learned ineffective beliefs and behaviors that can be replaced by a positive mindset and health-promoting behaviors. With the same tools that you'll find in this book, Diane was able to integrate resources such as mindfulness and relaxation techniques into her life to help her feel more grounded and safe. She explored her history and developed a greater tolerance for facing her painful emotions. Writing about her past allowed her to feel in control of her life now. As a result of her consistent commitment to self-care, she strengthened her self-acceptance and compassion. After several weeks of practicing the action steps that you'll learn in this book, Diane had an epiphany. My parents neglected me, and now I neglect myself by not taking care of my body as an adult. They could not love me the way that I needed, but I can become good at loving myself. A lot of people struggle with that. I know I do. And I also disassociate a lot. Like, I've noticed it, especially, like, recently, like, with driving and stuff. I always kind of zone out when I'm driving. I just go into autopilot, which is the thing. But even, like, you just get into going through the motions, and when you do that, you put yourself into, like, a numbness. For myself, that's disassociating. That's why, like, a lot of times we will want something to do. Like, we want to touch something because we're trying to disassociate, you know, or distract ourselves. We scroll on our phones endlessly. We, you know, may, like, binge eat or binge something that's not good for you. And this says, in practice, in what ways can you relate to Diane's story? Take some time to write down any associations that you have. So, you know, where do you not take care of yourself? You may not have gone through the exact same thing that Diane went through, where, like, you know, the circumstances growing up and whatever. But it doesn't really matter what the circumstances were. That's just an example. Do you ever find yourself, like, did you ever find yourself as a child maybe not getting the care that you saw other children get? Did you ever feel like you didn't belong to your family? Did you ever feel, even just with your peers at school and stuff, that is traumatic to go through, like, these feelings of inadequacy or not receiving what we need or should have, or what others are receiving in front of us, can then later on in our lives make us put things aside. Like, I will feed them, obviously, because they're like my kids, but I will feed them before I feed myself. I will go to work with a hurt knee on my days off. I will do, you know, a lot of silly things. Like, even when I was sick in bed, I would get up and try to help other people that I knew needed help, even though it wasn't an emergency, and even though, you know, I probably shouldn't have. I should have just taken care of myself. Those are examples of how, you know, we can mess ourselves up and not care for ourselves, and it's a learned behavior. If you know, like, I think about it in so many different ways. Like I can imagine how parenting, like, healthy, because I've seen it. I've seen the examples. Like, I follow people online who are like, this is how you should talk to your kid as opposed to this, or this is what you should do for your kid as opposed to that. And when you see the fucking difference, you're like, yep, you should. You know, like, I could see why that would make sense, you know. But when you're left to your own devices as a child, you're left to your own devices as an adult, and if you didn't see certain things, you won't do certain things. So you've got to learn those certain things. So tomorrow we'll start with embracing change, and get going. But that's your prompt for today, to write down what ways can you relate to Diane's stories. Take some time to write those things down. So where are you not taking care of yourself at this time? You know, where have you been putting yourself last? Like, what is something you want to be doing right now that you know is good for you? And then set some intentions. So, you know, how did I take care of myself today? This morning I got up early, I took a shower, I did my makeup, I went to the bank, I went to the CVS, and I did all those things before I went to work so that I could get them done. And then after the thing was over, I went and got dog food and some stuff for myself, and got what I needed, and then sent all the rest of my money to pay rent. A good thing that happened was, I got called in tomorrow, and I got a better van today. I'm like, that's good, because I'll make more money tomorrow, and I had a nice van today. So something I'm grateful for is that I have orders coming in, I have good abundance happening, I'm working. And then summarize today in one word, stressful. What's your intention for tomorrow? To get through the day early, get home, and get things done for my own business. And why is it important? Because I want to get things out, and I want to get on top of that, and I want to be productive with my own stuff so that I'm successful. And how will I embody it? I want to get my ass home and do all the things I need to do, and Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing.